Now, you may never have bloating after you watch this video. Now, people do know that there's certain foods that cause bloating, like beans, legumes, fruit, sugars, especially like lactose from milk, too much fiber, especially if you eat too much bran and other types of fibers. And as a side note, if someone has irritable bowel syndrome, you should never, ever, ever give them bran. That will just completely tear them up. But let's say you eliminate a lot of the foods that cause bloating and you still have bloating. Okay, then what? Now, there's something very fundamental that you need to understand to be able to get rid of bloating. And that is this thing called bile. Bile is made by your liver. It's stored in the gallbladder, and it has three main purposes. And I'm going to give you a really good demo to help you understand bile. Bile is dishwashing detergent. That's what bile is, okay? So we have some fat here, and we have detergent. We have soap. So if we mix these together, okay, and we shake it up, you can see it emulsifies. Now, what does emulsify mean? Emulsify means to break down something into smaller droplets. So when we add bile, which is a detergent, to fat, you get these smaller particles, thereby increasing the surface size so your pancreas can release the lipase enzyme to break it down fully for it to be absorbed in the small intestine. So the first purpose of bile is to help you absorb certain things in fats, especially the important things like fat-soluble vitamins, vitamin A, D, E, K1, K2, and other things like omega-3 fatty acids. Very, very important. So that's number one. Number two, bile helps you eliminate excess cholesterol. In fact, bile is the primary thing that regulates the amount of cholesterol because you have cholesterol that comes from the diet and you also have cholesterol that your body makes. Bile is there to make sure that it does not build up in the body. And this is why one cause of high cholesterol or high lipids is really a bile deficiency. And number three, and this relates to your bloating, bile is antimicrobial. In other words, it kills microbes that are in the small intestine. Normally, you should not have a lot of microbes in the small intestine, especially the microbes that make certain gases like hydrogen and methane. When you have too much hydrogen or methane, you're going to get bloating. And that is called small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And what's interesting about that is when people had their gallbladders removed, the studies show that their risk for getting small intestinal bacterial overgrowth goes up. Now, there's something else that occurs when you don't have enough bile. You get undigested fat that tends to accumulate in the small intestine. And now that forces the intestine to try to digest it. And so we have this decreased transit time, right? Because it's not going through very easily. And that alone is another cause of bloating because you're going to get excess fermentation. And on top of that, bile helps to lubricate the colon. And this is why not having enough bile could cause constipation, and having too much bile can give you diarrhea. So when people get bloating, they usually take some medication, they might take some enzymes, they might take a probiotic, or maybe even some type of a medication that takes the spasm out. But what they really need is bile salts. So as you can see, bile is so essential for your digestion, and